Hey guys, thanks so much for joining us for another episode of the Business Advisory Podcast. I've got a good friend of mine, but also a really talented business pro in the session today, Dan Claps. Dan, say hi to everybody, and I'll do an embarrassingly good introduction for you.
Thank you, Dave, for having me. Excited to talk.
Yeah, well, guys, I want to tell you a little bit about Dan. So he's a guy that's been there, done that in a lot of ways. He looks young, but he's got a lot of great experience I want to pull out of him today. We're going to be talking about a number of things in the FranDev world, but especially he's especially suited for it because he started in 2014, right? Dan he was a consultant, and a couple of years later he started an organization called Career Transition Leads, in part out of necessity, right? Needing, as a consultant, a high volume consultant, needing better quality leads, started this whole process to develop them. And over the years, he continues to run his franchise consultancy group. It's Finding Business Online, right? And then developed a couple of years ago Nurture Assist, which is really kind of a lead generation support infrastructure for franchisors. Is that a good way to describe that, Dan?
That's correct. We're generating leads directly for franchisors through Nurture Assist.
Yeah. And so, guys, what we're talking about today, though, is what are three ways that things that create rockstar franchise consultant and franchise development teams. And I just want to show you, we've got the guy here that's going to help us with that. But Dan, tell us a little bit more about yourself, even a little bit more about Career Transition, Nurture Assist. And I think that'll be a good context for everybody before we jump into the topic today.
Sure. Well, I got my start in franchising in 2014 through a franchise system called Murphy Business and Financial. And they were actually a franchise for selling businesses. So they teach you how to become what's called a business broker. And through that franchise system, I discovered franchise consulting because they had the ability to do that through IFPG and a membership through the franchise to IFPG. And so started in franchise consulting. And in early 2016, Don Diskowski, the founder of IFPG, and I met and presented this idea of generating a lead generation company. And we started that together in 2016, Career Transition Leads. Took a break from franchise consulting to focus on that, which is a business of generating leads for franchise consultants. And later in 2018, we started to have this overflow of leads that we could not sell. Whether it was they weren't qualified enough, we charge a certain amount of money for each lead. So there's a lot of parameters before they can get sent to a consultant. We had these extra leads, and we tried discounting them and selling them for cheap, and we tried giving them to a broker for a commission split, and we found that the latter, that maybe the broker would not have called the leads. Their laptop was in the shop for a week. They didn't really treat those leads the way that we needed them to, and we need to monetize them because there's an inherent cost for us. And so we formed Find a Business Online, which is a franchise consulting arm to work with those extra leads.
Which is, I find that funny because I'm sure a lot of people think that as a lead generator that has a franchise consulting firm attached to it, or at least as a sister company, you'd probably cherry pick all the best leads. I'd probably consider doing that myself, but it's ironic that you guys are doing the opposite of that with Find a Business Online. We're like, these are the ones that aren't good enough to sell. Let's see what we can do with them. And yet, I mean, business is still running. How does, before we jump into the topic, how is business with even these lower quality leads?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I always address that. I actually, Find a Business Online is a team of 9 franchise consultants that are working together, similar to how a development company would work, where you've got a team that are on the payroll that work within a process. That's what we have. But it's actually the opposite. We want to be in the lead gen business. So we're looking to sell leads, and we sell the best leads we possibly can get out to our consultants. And I equate it to how a bank doesn't want to be in the real estate business. They want to be in the lending business. Yeah. But they have to sometimes own real estate, during foreclosures and things like that. We're the same thing. We have this extra lead pool that we have to work with. But as far as that goes, I mean, we're doing anywhere from 8 to 10 placements a month, with about typically 2.5 territories purchased per client.
So not bad with bad leads, right?
Right.
Yeah. So this bleeds into our topic very nicely, or transitions well. So let's let's kind of frame this up. We're going to talk today about three things, or three things that Rockstar franchise consultants and FranDev teams are doing to succeed. And let's talk about the three topics first, and we'll jump right into the first one. The three topics are developing proper lead flow. I see this all the time. Franchise consultants or FranDev teams, they get 10 leads a month, or they get 300 leads a month, but they're bad, like just rotten leads. Like these aren't, anyway, we'll talk about that in a minute. So getting proper lead flow in place. The second topic we're going to talk about today is how do you get an effective lead engagement and follow-up strategy to really work for you that creates scale. Because I mean, you can handwrite follow-up notes and lick stamps and put them on envelopes and send them out to 100 people a month, but like there's a problem with scalability when you start getting too like microscopic with your thought process. So we need to talk about like the balance, and also maybe some automation tips. And you see it as the lead gen and also as the consultant groups. You got a unique perspective there, Dan. And then the third topic today is how do we create best in class deal management? Because a lot of folks might be really good at calling or getting in touch quickly, but they're terrible then at helping to move a deal through a pipeline, a flow after initial contact. So we want to talk about those three things. And if you got all three, you've got a Rockstar FranDev pro or team. So let's jump into topic one. And I'm just going to ask you, Dan, what do you see? Like, first of all, let's talk about what types of lead gen are there? Because there are a lot of options out there. They're not all bad. In fact, all of them can be good, I think. But what would you say are kind of the big buckets of lead generation that people are using in consulting right now?
Sure. In consulting or in FranDev as well?
Well, FranDev primarily.
Okay. Well, I think obviously one of the big buckets is franchise consultants, right? If you're plugging into franchise consultants, it's a great resource because they're doing all the work. They're, qualifying leads, and they're bringing them to a brand that's pre-selected, matched to that candidate. So there's, broker groups is a great opportunity for lead gen, of course. Second would be, if you put them into buckets, I would say you've got portals, which is anything related to someone going on the internet, Googling, how do I purchase a franchise, or most profitable franchise of 2022. They end up on the Google search engine, and there's landing pages that they can be led to and find information about franchises. They fill out their information, and that portal is providing that lead to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's social media is a bucket. So anything with Facebook, Instagram, Google ads, which I would consider, that's what we do at Nurture Assist. Those are rented. That is the two I've just mentioned, portal leads and the social media. Those are rented ads. You're going to spend money. You're going to get ads. When you stop spending money, you stop getting ads. And then the fourth bucket, I would say, would be organic, building your own lead generation system on your FranDev website. And that's a longer road, but that's like building a house versus the two renting options I mentioned.
Yeah. And there's one other one that I've seen people use a lot. And to be frank with you, I'm a little astounded people are still putting money in it, but it can work, is buying lists. Do you have any experience with that, or any comments on that, where they'll go out and like buy ZipRecruiter lists of people that have uploaded their resumes or something like that with a certain filter attached? So it's like, executives who've recently uploaded a resume, or resume leads is another way to look at those. What are some of your thoughts on those?
I think anything in a lead generation system that is targeting the right audience can work. I think if you're doing those ways, just make sure you're doing it in a way that is transparent and ethical. I believe you got to, those sources, they have their terms and conditions. You're going to make sure that you're following whatever their terms and conditions are. But yes, I think reaching out to an executive type in transition, that's a great way to generate a lead. And I definitely have a lot of experience in that realm.
Yeah, well, hence the name, career transition, right?
It's interesting. Like, to me, that would be, if we talk about, you've got the renting space, like the portals and the social media ads and Google ads. And then you've got the building a house, like your own organic website, SEO. Another option would be like that. You're building your own database. It's harder, but in the long run can be a really great process for sure.
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, I agree. And I think they all have a place, right? And there's a balance between them. And depending upon the type of the business that you're trying to build and your current needs, I think there's a blend that works well. Let's break it down a little bit though. So what has been your experience with these lead sources? Like where do you find that you've had the most success, and what is your blend that seems to work well for you?
Sure. And I don't know if that alarm is me. If you
You know
can hear
what, I think it might be my daughter's iPad that's
Oh,
sitting behind me.
all
So
right. As long as it's not me.
yeah, I'm going to mute and disappear off screen for a second and shut that thing off. So you go ahead and answer that question if you don't mind.
Okay, sure. So as far as lead sources go, so I have a belief that the types of leads that you generate should always be a large pool. You should always have a large net. And I tell this to clients that purchase CTL leads. You never want to be completely dependent on one source, because they could pull the rug from under you at any time, right? Whether it's Google changing their algorithm, Facebook changing their privacy standards,
Mhm.
a business like Career Transition or another having a change in their pricing or their business model. If you're completely dependent on one lead source, you're always going to be potentially in a lot of trouble. So
Yeah.
you always want to have a large net. Um, and I think that you should have high intent leads and a mixture of lower intent leads,
Mhm.
and then processes for each of those that are different depending on the type of source.
Yeah, break that down. I love that categorization: high intent leads, low intent leads. I could stab a guess at what you specifically mean, but clarify what you mean. Like, how would somebody make sure they know they've got a high intent lead versus low intent lead?
Sure. So first of all, like you look at if you're a franchisor, let's say as a franchisor, you need your high intent leads are going to be anything that comes into your website, broker leads from, let's say you're working with IFPG or another group, leads that come from a broker. That's a high intent lead typically, because those are like a 1 in 9 closing ratio, right? 1 in 9 referrals typically will close. So those are high intent. Maybe when those leads come in, they're going right to your franchise development manager. They're calling right away. Then you're going to have this other side of the spectrum, which is a lower intent, but there's more deal flow in that sometimes.
Yeah.
And I equate it to if you could make $100 an hour, okay, or $50 an hour. I'd obviously want to make $100 an hour, but let's say you could only work 5 hours a week at a job for $100 an hour, or $50 an hour for 40 hours a week. Which one's going to make you more money in the long run?
Yeah.
Right? More hours. And so when people say, well, I'm closing 1 in 9 broker leads. Well, that's great. But if you're only getting 9 a year, 9 referrals, you're only doing 1 deal a year.
Yeah.
So you need to focus on a higher volume, but higher transaction number. So with the lower intent, perhaps you're going to have a call qualifier and a CRM that's texting and automating the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. But it all boils down to having the right mix, really, the right strategy, because nobody gets, unless you're like Smash My Trash a couple of years ago, right? I mean, those guys just blew up, and you'll get an occasional franchise concept that will just explode, right? But generally speaking, most franchisors are in a situation where they've got to be methodical, and they also don't want to sell 200 units in a year. That's a mistake. For many franchise systems, they can't support it. So, so knowing the high intent, low intent leads, what would you say is an ideal mix? Let's say I've got 50 units, so I'm getting established as an emerging brand, kind of mid-emerging, and now I've got the infrastructure to start supporting more growth, 50 to 100 units. What would you say is an optimal mix? Like, what type of a mix should they be thinking about having?
Sure. Well, first of all, I would always budget a percentage. This is something I see franchise consultants do this more, but not franchisors as much. It's when you create your marketing budget, put a percentage of whatever comes in right back into lead gen. So you had 3 great placements in the month, put 20% of that budget right back into lead gen. That's a good way to kind of figure out the financial component. Work with a CRM like Client Tether, where you can see analytics on when you're getting leads. Are you reaching them right away through text and email? Is your rep calling them right away? If someone calls in, are you answering the phone with almost 100% handle rate, meaning when someone calls in from a campaign that you're reaching them? And then I think you would want to adjust accordingly from there. And just to give you an example, in our call center, we have a predictive dialer that's dialing multiple people at once. We have a tool that allows us to see if people are answering and we're not available, right? And if that's the case, we have to slow down our lead gen. And we use a metric of if, less than 1%, if less than 1% don't answer the phone, or excuse me, they answer the phone and we're not available, we have to tone it back. So
Yeah.
you kind of have to use your CRM tool to gauge whether or not you can handle a certain amount of lead flow or not. Because that's what I see all the time. People buy leads and then they're not calling them and following up, and they're calling the lead source that it's not working.
Yeah. So let me share an anecdote on that. We have the unique position of being able to see all lead sources and in FranDev across all of our clients. And so sometimes when I talk to a client, they say, we're doing probably 200 to 300 leads a month. And I look at their team and they got one person. I say, now hang tight for a second. Like, if you just do the basic math of like how well you can follow up with those leads, why are you buying so many leads? Because there's no way they can keep up with that many. And often it's because they're like, well, lead quality. It's almost not the case there. There are some lead sources that aren't as good as others. And we're not going to have that discussion today. You might see some reports come out from me later in the year about that, and it might ruffle some feathers, but like I get to see that from our perspective. But really what I see happening there, and this will lead into the next topic a little bit, but they're not following up effectively. Like they're not working the lead. They're not talking to that lead because they have so many coming in. There's no way they can get a text to them and an email within the first 2 minutes and call them within the first 4 minutes that lead popping. So they're essentially throwing away their money. They're burning it because they're spending too much on lead flow. So which kind of, I guess it comes back to part of the discussion that we've been having, Dan, which is the balance point, right? And part of it, I think, is quality versus quantity. And you were talking about, this, I would say this is the high intent versus low intent and getting the right mix. But tell me, what do you see? Like, have you seen people, they've got a 30% blend of high intent and then 70 low, like any metrics that you've seen that works well there?
So I don't have a particular percentage blend on high intent versus low intent. What I can tell you is in, the two career transition leads and nurture systems, we sell those leads and I only get the analytics of what clients are willing to share. But in Find a Business Online, what I can tell you is, we do, like I said, about 8 to 10 placements a month, and we spend about $10,000 per placement. Okay. And so when I look at that blend, we actually are having a lot of success with low intent. We have a low intent lead gen system. As I mentioned, we're selling most of our best leads to consultants, and we have the lower intent are going into our funnel. We have a call center that are calling those leads, which essentially is a second time. They've already been on the phone with someone. They're getting sent to a second person who's then really scrubbing them. Scrubbing them meaning, do you have a credit score over this amount? Are you ready to make a decision on a business if we find you one within the next 3 to 4 months? And basically checkbox. And although we've got a massive amount of leads going into the funnel of low intent, only a small percentage of them are getting to the sales team. And so in our business, we actually have, I would say, 80% low intent going into a funnel and then, and then to the sales team. But you have to, if you're going to do that, you can't have the one salesperson, like you mentioned. You got to have a team.
Yeah, we got to have a team of setters and qualifiers, right? I think this is an important discussion, maybe a podcast unto itself, but there's a ratio. If you, depending upon the quality of the leads that you're getting, you have to find the sweet spot where everybody wants to go hire a couple of like high-end FranDev pros. But if you got a high volume of low intent leads, lower quality leads, you actually need more people on the top of that funnel, that sales funnel. You need more SDRs, you need more setters or call scrubbers or qualifiers, whatever you want to call them. Then you do closers. Sometimes you need a ratio of 4 to 5 to 1 of those, depending upon the volume of leads coming in.
This is the biggest mistake that I see people make with FranDev, and it's exactly this. They bring on the heavyweight FranDev pro. I got so-and-so, they were with Neighborly, they were with this group, with that group, and they bring them in, a solid compensation structure of a FranDev pro, which they deserve.
Yeah.
FranDev pro comes in, and the CEO of this brand says, hey, let's get started. We got 200 leads coming in. You got to call them and qualify them. And the FranDev pro says, whoa. At my last company, we had a system, and I was only working with the candidates that were, interested.
Yeah.
And so the CEO says, all right, well, I'll get you a call qualifier. And they'll go and they'll find someone. And really cheap out on it, honestly. $3,000 a month, get a college kid. This is what everyone does when they think of a call qualifier.
Yep.
And your business, your potentially $500,000 investment, whatever it is, the first experience they get with your brand is that call qualifier. And so it's actually where you should invest some decent money and get an actual qualified person who can speak the conversation and talk to a candidate and not turn them off. You're losing all those deals without even realizing it when you don't have someone like that.
Oh yeah. Well, and it's because let's say like you and I are probably in that target demographic of a franchise buyer for a lot of people, right? And so if
I think I'd get disqualified.
Yeah. I doubt that. But I mean, we're not in our 20s. We've had good careers. We have means to maybe, put some money down, good, maybe net worth. Like, I'm just saying, like, I'm not like we're trying to flex in this podcast, but like, if I were the person receiving that phone call from that qualifier, and I had just filled out my information to say, hey, I'm interested in potentially buying your concept, and some 20-year-old kid calls me that doesn't know a dang thing about anything, I can tell you, I agree. And this contextualizes, I would be a little turned off to say, now, wait a minute. Let's say it was like CertaPro, and I know they don't do this, right? Or let's say it's an HFC concept, and one of JT's guys, they don't have 18-year-old kids calling people. I'm confident of that. And they got a good training program over there. But if it did, I'd immediately say, I might've made a mistake, just because, I would not feel confident in the process. So I just want to validate your point that a very good thing for franchisors to be thinking about is what is my process? Who's the first point of contact? The tip of that spear needs to be someone who represents the brand well.
Absolutely. And not to beat a dead horse, but I'm speaking from, I've made this mistake. We had it in our call center. We were hiring, and we had to make a drastic change where we're paying $30 plus an hour to call qualifiers. And I actually think that's not enough, to be candid. I think that you really need someone that person feels like the first person they're speaking to. It may even be like a six-figure person. I mean, we're talking about someone that can actually get the person excited and qualified to learn about your brand. And you're going to get so many better people on with your FranDev team if you invest in that call qualifier.
Yeah, great point. Let's talk a little bit about now lead follow-up, to shift kind of the topic too, because I think that we've beat that up pretty well, but there are a lot of good nuggets in there for people to pull out of, what's proper lead flow, and how do we start the engagement process. So shifting into that, tell me a little bit about, what are the best consultants doing that you're seeing? How are they optimizing their lead contact, their lead engagement, and lead conversion rates?
Sure. So first of all, I think that it's a 10-step process, right? As a consultant, you got to get a good lead source plugged in. And then before you do anything, you need to get a CRM system plugged in. And I'm not saying that to shamelessly plug you guys, but with clientele, you've got the texting, you've got the the emails, you've got everything set up. Spend the time to build your nurturing process before you ever get a lead, before you're busy. Spend Monday morning just designing your emails or working with someone to design them. Create content, videos, sales copy that are all put together and automated, so that the day you get a lead, they get a text immediately, an email immediately, some drip series that go on, some to book a call, some copy written just to lift you up as a thought leader. I think it's so important. And I think, all of that has to be personalized. It can't be too robotic.
Yeah, 100%. Otherwise, your response rates, people think they're getting, again, people blame the lead source. All these poor lead providers are getting kicked in the chops all the time. But often it's, somebody used some sort of, MailChimp genericized email follow-up sequence, and it's not enough. I see through it, you see through it. So why do we think that our candidates wouldn't see through a very generic follow-up campaign that's not personalized?
And I'll challenge people to think about this. If you go online right now and you call American Airlines, or you call an Uber to get you from your home somewhere, and you don't get a response, are you happy?
No.
Right? Why do we expect that for us as people, we should get responses immediately from anything we inquire on? I was just last night on a technology product that I inquired, and the guy called me immediately. right? Why is it different in FranDev? These people that have an interest, we're calling them 2 days later, 5 hours later. If you're not, and I don't, it's challenging, but this isn't, leads are necessary, but I understand that they're not always perfect. But before you are mad at the leads, you got to challenge yourself to say, how am I going to set up a system, whether it's technology, myself, a team, to call these leads as soon as they come in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, here's a little bit of I don't want to say it's misinformation, but in every other industry that I've ever worked in, there's a standard that everyone has abided by, which is, you need to be having a meaningful engagement, not an email, meaningful engagement with a lead within 5 minutes, because there's so much data. There are millions of data points to show this cliff, right? If you wait more than 5 minutes, you wait 10 minutes before you reach out, there's a 10x drop. If you wait 30 minutes, it's another 7x drop, and pretty much like no chance that you're going to engage that lead without just incredible Herculean effort to follow up. And in the franchise world, they're like, oh, you got to call everyone within 4 hours. And my BS meter goes off immediately. I mean, that's bullcrap, because 4 hours from now, that busy executive who's your ideal candidate, he's like at a soccer game or in the boardroom. Like he won't even remember who you are in 4 hours. No wonder the industry has 1% close rates on their leads. It's because they've got crap processes. And I'll stop monologuing about this for a second, but like that's baloney. And anyone who believes that if I can wait 4 hours to contact a lead, is smoking something, and it better be good.
Yeah, maybe the 4 hours are going faster in their mind. I just got back from a lead generation conference, a non-franchise conference, a lead gen specific. And I say this with, I'll say myself and the franchise industry. So myself included, we are all light years behind these other industries. This was insurance, mortgages, anything that has to do with lead generation, real estate, and all of them, calling a lead within 5 minutes, they started doing 5 years ago, and they're beyond that topic. And it's what we need to do as an industry is conversion rate. You're right. They increase significantly. It's actually 40 seconds is the real number you want to be at. Like, think about if you filled out a form yourself, put yourself again in the shoes. I just had this with an insurance quote. I filled out a quote online. As I'm looking at the quote that's in front of me, my phone rings. There's a girl explaining the policy to me. I had a question. She switched it up on the screen while I was talking to her. And by the time we were done, I had put my credit card and bought that insurance policy right then and there. If she had called me 5 minutes later, I would have been on another Zoom call, and it never would have happened.
Yeah, or better yet, or worse yet, you would have filled out another form for another insurance company, and they might have been on the phone with you, and you might have been closing that deal with them with your credit card on the phone because they didn't engage you right away. Yeah. Right? People that are looking for franchises are the same as people that are looking for a new roof on their house. Fundamentally, they're not going to say, I only want to look at Shuck and Shack, or I only want to look at CertaPro Painter. If they're looking at painting, they're like, I'm looking at, well, I've decided I want to get into franchising. I've done it, the zero moment of truth, right? From Google. I've already done the research to know this is what I'm interested in. And now I think I want to go into painting because there's a lot of margin. It can be very semi-absentee. So I'm going to look at CertaPro because they come up a lot in my searches. Probably Lime and Painter One and maybe 5-Star and one other, right? Klappenberger or Color World or whoever, Painter One, like some other brand. They're going to probably look at 4 brands on their own. And so if you're not the first to reach them, then there's a pretty high likelihood that you haven't interrupted their additional lead search process. But if you follow up right away, they might just have 2 that they filled out before you have a conversation. So you have less competition in that flow.
Yeah, it's the same theory as people are bidding substantially more for the top of Google. People go to the first link on Google, the first ad, the first, when they're on Home Advisor, Angie's List, they go to the top. I mean, just think about yourself. If somebody calls you about CertaPro, they ask you about your background, you tell them for 30 minutes while your family is waiting to have dinner. And then you get another call and it's the other painting concept. Do you want to tell that story again? No, you're done. You have either your first or your last in the sales game. And the likelihood that you're going to start to really go down the CertaPro funnel is substantially higher because you now have that relationship with Jim or whoever the person is, right? And the other person that called you, you're hanging up because you're having dinner, right? the
Yeah.
first pass is the one you're going to get the most response from.
Yeah. And in every industry, it's the same. Some industries, it's as high as like 80%. The predictor of who's going to get the deal is who's the first to respond to the lead. In franchise, it might be a little lower. I don't think anyone's collecting that data. I'll have to see if we can pull it out of our system, but actually, I wouldn't know. That'd be tough to find. But it's true though. If you're not first, you're generally last. And yeah, it's fill out a mortgage. If you have any doubt, guys, go and fill out some sort of online mortgage, refinance form, and you'll see you'll have 3 people call you in the first like 45 seconds.
Yeah.
And it almost feels harassing. So you want to be a little cautious about that, but professional engagement, immediate engagement, you'll come across the right way.
Yeah, just to wrap up this topic really quick, I haven't figured it out either. I went to this Leads conference to figure it out because I have a goal to get us to the point that we call a lead within 40 seconds. It's not easy because you have to have the infrastructure to do it, but it's definitely the future for franchise development.
Agreed. Well, let's hit one more question on this topic. Mistakes. Like you see a lot of people goofing this up, right? What are some of the most common misconceptions that we ought to clarify right now around? We talked about the time follow-up. What else? Any other big mistakes you're seeing people make in this space of lead follow-up and engagement?
The first 8 seconds of the call, someone would argue actually 4 seconds matters so much. And people are calling leads saying, Dave, you submitted information on XYZ brand. I want to ensure you're financially qualified before we move forward, or I need to qualify you before we move forward, or anything in that construct. Anyone with wealth that's a little bit lower intent, they're not chomping at the bit to buy your franchise, they're going to be turned off by that. And really anyone's going to be turned off by that, but someone may look past it. When the first call, no matter what, should start with just a big open-ended question. Dave, I got your information here from online. I see you're interested in franchising. What's going on that you're looking into businesses? And that's it. And that should be the same for no matter what franchise we're developing. It's one big open-ended question. What's going on in your life? And pausing and listening.
Yeah, that's great advice. Great advice. Yeah, let's move on. So last category and topic for someone who's going to be a real rock star in FranDev is managing the deal flow. And what we mean by this is once you've had your initial discussion with somebody, there's a lot that needs to happen before they ink a franchise agreement. Tell me, like, what's ideal here? At least, a couple of main focal areas that you feel like, man, if you're not doing X or Y, you're probably not optimizing your deal flow. What are some thoughts you have on that, Dan?
Yeah, sure. Well, from your process, standardizing it, right? It's standardized. It's an 8-step process. They go through X to Y, and it's standardized. I think companies like Franchise Fastlane or Repum Group or other development companies, they've really proven out that model, right? They've got great franchise brands, but I've seen where a great franchise brand is on their own, then they join an FSO and they go through the roof. And all it really is it's the same brand, but they are plugged into a standardized sales process. So that's number one. You got to standardize it. And you can't be too rigid. Sometimes you maybe need to move a little bit for each candidate, but you really shouldn't, deviate from that standardization too much. And then most importantly, I would say, again, before you ever get a lead, go work on your KPIs with your CRM provider, which I can give you those if you like the top ones.
Yeah, actually, go ahead. Like share a little bit. You got some interesting insights there that others don't have. So anything you're willing to share, I think would be great.
Well, like if you're running a development process and you want to increase your conversion percentage, you need to first know what it is. And I find so often that people don't know their KPIs. So, it's not a lot. It's a piece of paper. You could write, if you were stranded on an island, right? And it was me and you on an island, and all we could do is get one piece of paper that, we could know if our business is still running, back in the States. And you could have 5 questions. It's KPIs, right? And it's, how many leads did we get today? What was the contact rate, the conversion rate on those leads? How many of those leads showed up to their appointment? And And this is just for FranDev, right? And then you're looking at, how many discovery days you have booked on average per lead source. And I mean, from a consulting standpoint, we're looking at how many hard referrals. I can tell you how many deals we're going to do in 4 months today based on how many discovery days we have booked, but most importantly, how many hard referrals we had this month. I could tell you almost to a pretty accurate guess how many placements we'll do in 4 months, because our average sales cycle is about that number, which we know in our CRM. So I kind of got off topic, but it's a few KPIs that you need to know.
Yeah, I love it, and I totally agree. And you have to be able to define them and also be able to track them. A couple of insights for me on this one, because we consult with a lot of folks and try to help them optimize this part of the business, the lead follow-up, and the deal flow optimization. But you need to be able to track where you're losing people. That was a challenge I had in other industries, using big boy tools that everybody thinks are the best, like Salesforce or HubSpot or other things. Like, I've been admins of many of these platforms before. They're good CRMs for pharmaceutical sales and systems management software sales. Not the best in the FranDev world, overly complex and don't have the tools you want. But they also can't tell you, where am I losing people in the sales flow? So you want to be able to track that and see, well, how many people came through the door, how many leads in, right? How many of them had an initial discussion with us, or had an initial call scheduled, then had their initial discussion with us, and then filled out an application, and then, right, like, you've got to be able to see, like, where am I losing people, because then you can zero in on that and say, okay, we've got the data. Now we're going to use the data to take action, and we're going to try to improve this contact rate. I need another call qualifier fixed, right? Watch it for a month. Like, that's the process of being like an SVP or someone who's over this FranDev process. Is now you monitor it and you tweak it, and you monitor it and you tweak it. And that's a very mature way to improve total optimization of the process. You got to be able to see it, though. You got to have data, like you're saying. You got to know these KPIs and have a way to track them, so you can see them and then make real-time decisions to try to improve them.
I don't know, Dave. I might have to switch to you guys. I'm thinking about it.
No, that's not the point of this, but yeah.
No, I know. I'm just kidding. But in all seriousness, I kind of had that light bulb moment. We used, because you mentioned HubSpot in Find a Business Online, we use HubSpot, and I think you said it really perfectly. HubSpot's a suite of products. They are a suite of multiple products that, in my opinion, they're if they can have mediocre in each product, but it's all blended together, that creates a great product for some people. But when you're trying to get more granular, I think a CRM that's in your vertical is always going to be better, because it's easier to utilize. So I don't know. I have to look, because things change so fast with systems, right? I mean, something that was great 3 years ago is obsolete now.
Yeah. Well, happy to have that conversation with you offline, Dan. Let's end on this note. Let's talk about just some common mistakes that we see people. Well, actually, no, let's end on this question, because I like this one more. Optimizing the follow-up. So the nurturing process that we were talking about before with leads, that doesn't go away. The necessity doesn't end. Where are some of the stages in this deal flow where you see people fall off because they're probably not getting the right follow-up and nurturing?
So obviously, the first call to get the lead into the process of boarding. You're saying after they're in the process, they fall off. Yeah. So I mean, what we've done is we've set up automations that help with this, because we would see that consultants would have a robust pipeline. And honestly, it's very hard to have more than 20 solid people in your pipeline as a franchise consultant.
Yeah.
Over 20, it's hard to track. You lose track of the people. And we would see out of those 20, the candidate that was really great, they fell through the cracks somehow. And so through automations, there we have is essentially, if they're in a deal stage, far along, and they go inactive for a period of time, there's a trigger that says, hey, remember John Smith? Maybe you need to reach out to John Smith. And it's a small thing, but it makes a difference when you're focused on your pipeline, and there's this golden opportunity that maybe you're just missing, and the CRM's helping you recognize that. Another tool is people that are in your process that fell out, but they're interacting with your content. So perhaps you've got a monthly email that's going out, and John Smith that went to discovery day, you forgot all about him because he didn't purchase, but he keeps watching your videos. Like maybe it makes sense to reach back out to him, and there could be an automation to notify you of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a smart way to approach it. We've seen folks that have taken lists of old leads that were dead, right? And then re-engage those old leads with meaningful nurturing content. And they've had better lead conversion rates with their old dead leads than the industry average. If you have the proper nurturing sequence in place, right? Educational content, give, take kind of a mindset. But I see a couple of milestones. After you've had your initial meeting, there's a certain amount of people that drop off. They never fill out like an application officially and like that. And then, but if you can just build a couple of nurturing steps in there, like reminding them why there's a value add, why there was synergy, it doesn't have to be much. Sometimes it's like an email and maybe a text. But if you have a little bit of nurturing automation, it kind of greases the skids so things keep sliding through the process. It takes the friction out of the deal flow. And but also, your people are so busy that their intention is to do it for every deal and they can't. So if there's a way to build some automation, I just gave somebody the FDD. I've got a period of time I've got to chill. Why not have some automation that cues off of that, right? And stays in touch. You can't sign a deal, but it doesn't mean you couldn't necessarily send out some additional educational content or something like that, right? So staying in touch with people in a period of time that is almost like is intended to almost act as a cooling off period. You might as well continue to stay in touch, but obviously not trying to break any of the processes that are required by the feds. So, but there are ways to do it. Making sure on that 14th day, 15th day, you've got automated pickup where that process picks up and starts engaging again and trying to set an appointment again. And like, there's a lot of stuff, right, that you can do to automate so you don't lose people as much as you can in the process. Yeah, well, give me one more parting thought. I know we're at time, so we probably better wrap this up. And this has been great. I've got a lot of notes. I think there are tons of good nuggets in here. What are a couple of summary points that you would share, things just to pull out from what we discussed that people ought to remember from this?
I would say, invest in those 3 areas that are so important. Your initial outreach, getting that in to happen as fast as possible.
Mhm.
Whatever tool you use, have a really robust marketing process that's relatable to each candidate's journey where they're at. So create a marketing email and text process.
Mhm.
And those KPIs, I always think that the KPI part is a good point. And what you said, I mean, finding those areas where the candidates are falling out is so important as well.
Yeah, I love it. Well, those are great. I would echo those as well. And thanks so much for taking time to kind of let me suck knowledge out of your head to share with people, Dan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.